Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a podcast brought to you by the Triad Network. This podcast is designed to share trending topics occurring within the world and our communities and bring them a behavioral and mental health perspective. Welcome to Behavioral Health Today. I'm your host, Peter Finger, and my guest today is Mark Talaga, a licensed professional counselor and the founder of the Center for Identity Potential. Mark brings a unique perspective to mental health, having transitioned from a career as a video game developer to specializing in the developmental needs of gifted and neurodivergent individuals. As the host of the Hopelessly Gifted podcast, he focuses on moving beyond outdated models of pathology to help families and educators recognize that many struggles are actually signals of a mismatch between an individual and their environment. Mark's work offers practical, growth-oriented strategies for managing perfectionism, anxiety, and the complexities of modern screen culture. I'm joined by Mark today, where we'll explore the shift in how we view giftedness, moving away from labels of pathology towards systemic strategies for managing perfectionism, asynchronous development, and the unique complexities of gifted kids. Mark, I'm so excited to have you on our show today. Welcome.
Oh my gosh, thanks so much for having me, Peter.
I'm very excited to have you. I've really enjoyed researching you and your work and the work that you're doing with the Center for Identity Potential. And I'm really kind of curious because your path into this work is kind of different than others because you began your career as a video game developer before becoming a counselor. So I want to ask you, what was that aha moment that really led to this shift towards supporting gifted and neurodivergent population?
Yeah, I mean, it may not have been a aha moment as much as an crud moment where, I was one of those, gifted kids growing up, never formally assessed or diagnosed or anything, but school was easy. It wasn't an issue. It just felt like everything came naturally, never studied, never took notes. And, I just went on and on and on. And then around college, I really hit a wall where my executive functioning, my ability to manage myself and be places on time, it all got away from me. So I kind of eked my way through college. But I was left with this feeling of like, oh man, maybe I'm not good at stuff. Like, I don't know if I can survive this. And I thought to myself, well, I'll just do something that I love. I'll get into video games. I'll figure out a way to do that. And I was able to, and I worked in the industry for 4 years, but the same issues kept coming up. And I wasn't aware of them at the time, why I was struggling to stay on top of things and that nature. But it eventually led me to getting fired. And
Oh, wow.
It was this moment of like, oh, shoot, didn't I have this dream job that everybody tells me, is the top of the mountain? But it allowed me to say like, well, what am I really doing here? What do I really want to be doing? And I knew I wanted to help people, and that's about as far as I could get. And I remembered in my past, I had, a therapist when I was a teen that was very helpful to me. And I thought, well, I'll just do that. So I kind of still had the same mindset of I'll just rely on what I got, see how far it takes me. And if I don't like it, I'll just bail. But I eventually got connected with Andy Mahoney in the center. And he was one of the few people in my life who's like, hey, man, like you've got more challenges than you think as far as what it takes to really build the skill that you need to do the things you want to do. And as he taught me how to work with this population, I just had so much like revelation and, oh my gosh, that was me. And oh, that totally makes sense. And oh yeah, I see. And luckily that has definitely contributed to me being able to help, these kids and young adults because I can relate so well. But it was I don't know if it was an aha moment as much as a panic moment.
Yeah. No, I loved your story. And really, it's very interesting. Sometimes we kind of go into these spaces just a general curiosity for ourselves,
Hmm.
for bettering ourselves. But what it really does, it creates this moment of knowing, of authenticity. So when we're going and helping these populations, we really kind of understand that space on a deeper level because we've sort of gone through it. That's why I like so much about sort of the peer recovery space, right? It
Hmm.
takes one to know one. And really what you're sharing in this story is that your own challenges really kind of paved way, that experience to helping the populations that you serve today.
Yeah, I'm a recovered gifted kid, I guess, if it's, to
I
use
like
that
that.
lens of it, you know what I
Yeah, I
mean?
like that.
It
Yeah, I
it is
like
very
that.
much a lived experience
Mhm.
backed with some foundational understanding of where that comes from that, yeah, has made me, helpful to these kids.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to sort of start here, right? Because this label of neurodivergence sort of gives us a clinical point, but it really doesn't share the whole story of that gifted individual. Based on your time in this field, how do you sort of see this population differently than maybe the general public might? Give our audience really this new lens on how to view giftedness, and what would that be?
Right. And so I think we have to go back to the foundation of how do we interpret the word gifted? Because it's a loaded word. It sounds kind of superior. It's this, oh, isn't that wonderful for you? Life is easy. And I will
Mhm.
tell you right now, that is not the case for most people. There are some people that are just fine. But the idea is giftedness really is any form of human development, any form of what we need to grow as a human being and how we think and react and make connections, but it's in some level of extreme. If you were to compare it to the normative population, you are out on the bell curve, one, two, three, four standard deviations, to where, yes, you have some sort of excelling in something. But for me, it's not a test number or an IQ score. It's more like you could be artistically gifted, you could be
Mhm.
physically
Yes.
gifted, you could have a gifted sense of moral justice, emotionally gifted. All these things where it's coming out of you in some sort of raw extreme that maybe is perceived as quirky or weird or, histrionic or whatever it might be. But the reality is, it is just a part of their development. So the issue is when you have that extreme development in one or more areas of your life, it's usually paired with other areas of development or that are more in the middle, in the norm, or even delayed. And these
Mhm.
really, that creates gaps. And these gaps in our profile from, what we're able to know in our storehouse of knowledge to what we're able to execute on might be severe enough to where it creates real problems for a lot of
Mhm.
people that inherently know I'm a smart person, I'm a capable person, but boy, I just can't seem to get things working for me.
Right.
And for me, I want people to understand that neurodivergence is simply, it's not like you're an other. You're not another type of being.
Yes.
You're a human
Yes.
being,
Yes.
but you have these areas that are, yes, in some level of extreme, or you have these big gaps that can create challenges.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm kind of curious. So, as you are working with this population, how do you address those gaps? Is it strategies? Is it practices? Is it awareness? Like, where is really the starting point here?
Well, everything starts with awareness. Any
Yeah.
sort of process of change is going to have to start there. And so, but because we kind of know that that's what we're looking for, we have a more direct approach to assessing, hey, do we need more testing here? Do we
Mm,
need some neuropsych evaluations done or auditory testing or language or whatever it is? And it
mhm.
usually goes beyond what the normative might do. A lot of these kids come in and it's like, oh, I just can't concentrate and I just, I get bored easily. And then it's kind of like, oh, here
Yes.
comes the ADHD label. And that may not necessarily be what is going on or the full picture of what's going on.
Mhm.
And so, what we pride ourselves in is when we see a case that's relatively complex, we say we want to know everything, how they're processing language and how they're taking it in and how they're expressing it out in written and in verbal and all these other things, so that we start to see where these challenges are relatively hidden. Because what
Mhm.
gifted people are very good at is over relying on strengths. And
Mm.
so they tend to kind of just show off what they're very good at and don't want to really mention or look at where they may be vulnerabilities in the developmental profile.
Yeah, yeah, right. Because what you have is you have certain areas of the brain that are hyper trained and
Yes.
other parts that are less developed, and you use those strengths in order to sort of mask the weaknesses, right?
Exactly. And so, and it's not that we don't want to dismiss the strengths or celebrate them, but it can be this kind of seductive thing when you see a gifted kid who's struggling to just keep reminding them how great they are. Oh, but you're so
Mhm.
smart. Oh, you're so good. And
Mhm.
look what you can do here and there. But what that kid really needs is it's not fulfilling enough. I'm not meeting some internal piece of me that needs to be seen in this world, and that's really where I need the help. So I'll give the story a lot of times
Mhm.
about like a kid who will play tennis and he'll hit a shot and it just goes wide and he just collapses. He's in his head and hands crying And most people would be like, okay, you had one bad shot, no big deal, right? And it's kind of the worst thing you could say to that kid, because not the worst thing you could say, but it's not helpful as much as you think. Because what that kid needs to hear is, hey, I see what you're trying to do, and you being this upset about it tells me how much it matters to you and how much you recognize that you have potential to hit that
Mm,
shot. And so
mm,
what I'm going to help you do is get down into the micro skill of what you really need help with so that you can do it when you want to do it with some
mm.
relative accuracy.
Yeah, yeah. It's being able to really kind of recognize and see that person and sort of understand the emotional dysregulation that's happening and trying to give them the skills to overcome that moment.
Right, and it's hard to overcome that moment if they don't understand what the problem is.
Yes.
It's so hard to
Mm,
regulate, and emotional regulation is in and of itself a skill. And a lot of times we're pushing for the kid to regulate when it's more like, hey, this is when you are in a raw space. I need to get you out of here because you're not
mm,
at a place yet where you know how to manage that. And then in the therapy process, it's more like helping them recognize how these moments are much more vulnerable to them than they realize so that there's a
mm.
better layer of protection in how they enter into it or protect themselves from it.
Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting. You're right, because from a pathology standpoint, it can be so easy for us to like label ADHD or neurodivergent autism, etc. But your approach is much more individual. You're looking at the person and trying to understand those situations on a level that will directly address the areas where they need the most development.
Right. And that takes a
Yeah.
lot of assessment and a lot of time with that specific person. And you need to look at a lot of variables, more than you ever
Hmm.
think.
Hmm.
And so our work is never just with one person. It's with the family, it's with the
Yes.
school, it's with adjunctive support, it's with,
Hmm.
extended families sometimes. It's really about understanding who this child is and how they came into the world and all the pieces that affect them, and then helping them start to label how they want to express themselves, the identities they want to create, and what
Yes.
gets in the way of that.
Mm, mm. Oh, I love that. Even just getting down to the point of a person's identity and how they want to be expressed is such an interesting way to look at this challenge that's occurring. You talk a little bit about the environment, right? And you've already kind of defined or shared that you go through a number of tests, right, to sort of understand where the strengths and weaknesses are, but you're also trying to take the environment into consideration, right? I know from my research that you say that the struggles that gifted individuals face are signals of mismatched environment rather than maybe like signs of pathology, right? So, how does this perspective change the way a parent or an educator might approach a gifted child?
Right, exactly. You're looking at, we're always trying to find where there's a good fit, right? Where does
Hmm.
it fit for this child? And so let's say just for example, a child has, yeah, let's say ADHD or some visual processing stuff, meaning that when they start to they see a lot all at once, but it can be overloading and overwhelming. And you put that child in a classroom that is hyper decorated and posters and color and words are everywhere and there's little inserts and everything, which is for me, I think that's a lovely, fun, like I just like the vibe of that classroom. But for that kid, we already have an immediate overwhelm. So they are walking into the classroom with a low to medium grade of anxiety just in the physical environment. Now, I'm not saying that that teacher needs to start ripping stuff down, but it's more like how do we be conscious of where that child needs to sit in relation to
Hmm.
all that, or what can be done about that, or what the teacher might want to keep in mind for all her students. Is my environment being effective in the learning, or is it just aesthetically nice? And what's the intention behind it? And so we're looking at physical environments because we want to see what is really the thing that's going to help support the vulnerability, activate the potential, and finding that fit in multiple different contexts is not always easy. And sometimes it's knowing what to look for.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. Again, in other conversations around sort of neurodivergent minds, it's really trying to roll back to understand a person's nervous system and
Hmm.
how all of those things are triggered. So for you to go beyond maybe just the strengths and weaknesses of this person and sort of certain environments, to actually look at the work environments that that they are engaging with, I think it is that extra level of understanding. I also know that there's a lot of research in the gut, right? Some people are able
Oh
to
yeah.
sort of address things by nutrition, right? And that can be also another pathway to sort of emotional regulation.
Oh, absolutely. The physiology of the person it's funny. The more I do this work, the less it becomes about psychology for me. Like I'm
Yes.
starting to be like, it's almost always something physiologically, medically based, neurologically based. Like it's so rare for me where it's a pure psychiatric issue. It's
Hmm.
more like that's always the flavoring on top, and usually that gets developed over time through, yes, genetics and what you're born with, but
Right.
also just through not having these fits in life and not having this understanding of what you may need and how you need to proceed in life and how you have to make your own way. Like, i- you could have a kid who, wants to get into sales or something, right? But they're just, I'm too shy, or I don't know how to talk to people. You never want to limit that kid. What you're picking up on is there's some potential within them, but they really need to learn, you know, what is the way that you need to still figure out how to assess the need of the person you're selling to. And we know you have auditory processing issues, so you might have to ask for specific things from them or be okay asking for repeating, or can you put that in an email, whatever it is.
Mm.
Like it's always about not limiting the goal, but adjusting the pathway to that person and their profile so that it is a better fit.
Yeah, wow. I imagine that when you start to break things down for families, that they recognize that there's a lot of work in themselves.
Well, it's funny. I would ideally like that, but I think
Yeah,
more
right.
than
You're the
likely,
problem solver. Can't you solve my problem? Yeah.
yeah, right. Well,
Yeah.
it's not with me.
Hmm.
I have my own therapist. I
Hmm.
can't tell you how many times I've heard that. Because the idea is, yes, these kids didn't get it from nowhere. You know what I mean? Like it
Hmm.
didn't come from just randomness.
Hmm.
And yes, the parents relate more than they think, but because it presents differently, or we're just in a different time and culture, there's a disconnect between them seeing the challenges of their children and how they can relate to what it's really about, as long as they know what
Yeah.
the problem really is. Now, but I do have plenty of parents who are like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm getting therapy just by you talking about what's going on with my kid. And I'm like, that's a good start because now
Right.
you can relate. Because the number one goal for me is not if these kids are academically successful or not or getting good grades. I mean, that's if they want that, that's great. I want them to know how to build relationships. I want them to know how to connect into a world that is not necessarily built for them. And
Mhm.
sometimes that starts in the family. How do we connect
Mhm.
to one another more effectively and in a way where we're being heard and seen and understood? And that skill of connection to me is the root of, anything you want to do in this world.
Yeah, I love that as well. Right, being seen and understood is a core human characteristic. Everybody has that, and
Yep.
so being able to even just roll back aspirations to trying to create a healthy way for relationships, that is the purpose there.
That's everything.
Yeah.
But again, a lot of these gifted people, because they perceive the world so differently,
Mhm.
just on in the nature of the way they were born, they can feel like aliens. They can feel like I don't belong, I don't have any need. But I try to I'm never going to advocate that that's the way to think about it because it's a bit of a victimhood mindset. Poor me,
Mhm.
nothing works for me, nothing ever is going
Yeah.
to work for me. And it just doesn't empower that person to create what they might need in life to really move forward. And there are
Right.
some real challenges, and I'm not dismissing that. But the ultimate goal is, yes, you have to differentiate first. You have to set yourself aside and say, okay, I interact with this world differently. And where are those strengths? Where are those vulnerabilities? And I almost never call them weaknesses only because it's mostly all rooted in development. It can be
Mhm.
brought up. It could
Mhm.
be something that improves over time or even becomes a greatest strength for you ultimately if you get the right support.
Yeah.
And then after the differentiation process, knowing yourself well enough to integrate back into the world in a way where you can rely on those connections and create what you want to create.
Yeah, yeah, we've seen some incredible minds really change the world who come from a neurodivergent spectrum. I'm thinking of the CEO of Delta who helped create the ticketless airplane ticket, right?
Yep.
Like having cognitive spectrum in the workforce is necessary. it just is. It's very important for us to have that cognitive spectrum. So your work in being able to equip these gifted kids with these skills to kind of go out and fearlessly go into the world to craft relationships and build their skills, I think is so honorable.
I hope so. And one of the things we teach here is when we talk about fear, we always try to reframe it as desire.
Mm,
That's from Andy Mahoney, my mentor, the guy who took me on and taught me
mm,
everything. Fear is desire, and meaning when you feel afraid to move into the world, afraid to try something, afraid, it is because somewhere deep down it matters to you. It's something you want. Otherwise, you wouldn't care. Like
yeah.
if somebody's like, "Why don't you play professional football?" They're like, "What are you afraid?" I'm like, "No, I don't. I just don't even care about it. I don't even think about it twice. I mean, I like watching it, but if it was like, why aren't you helping more people? Like that would hit me hard. Like that, I'd be like, "Well, I am," and I'd get real defensive around it. But what I'd have to realize is I'm afraid of the idea of am I not, and what are my goals, and could I be doing better, and what does that need to look like? And it's really a desire at the root of it. And when we can tap into that with these kids who are, want you to believe, well, I'm afraid to fail or something like that. And it's not that they have a desire to fail. It's more that they are struggling from the desire to grow and possibly even be successful at that. And then what does that create?
Right.
More demand and more stuff. And, it
Mm.
just gets overwhelming.
Yeah, again, even just as you're talking or uncovering some things, that perspective shift of fear to desire helps me navigate that with a little bit more curiosity. I imagine it does with your children too.
Oh, yeah.
But I want to kind of park on this idea of perfectionism because
Hmm.
perfectionism can be paralyzing, right? But as you sort of help these kids reframe this, what are some of the growth oriented models that you use to help them feel safe, safe enough to fail?
Right. So we have a couple of ways we go about that. One, we first want to make sure that they understand that we are not against doing something perfectly. We are not
Mm,
against the idea of perfect.
yeah.
The whoever created the airplane that I'm about to fly on, the engineers behind it, had better be perfect. They had better be without any error or mistake, and that
Yeah.
is what I would expect from them. And then there's the idea of artistic perfection, all this kind of stuff. But it's more like we're looking at perfectionism as a defense mechanism.
Mm,
They're relying on perfectionism as a way to not deal with whatever it is they're struggling with that's related to the task. And that may not be the actual work itself. It could be I'm struggling with learning how to initiate. I'm struggling with learning how to sustain this. I'm struggling with learning how to talk to the teacher because I need clarification. Or maybe it is I actually see the vision of what I need to create in my head, but I don't really have the skills and the steps to do it. And so they stay in this kind of either procrastination or perfectionism. It's flip side of the same coin
mm,
of defensiveness around I need to develop skill in this area, and that's where the struggle really is. So we try to really dive down even deeper for them to understand where they have more recognition of a skill to build, which they have more control over. And you can create
mm.
scaffolding for that and frameworks for that and a different way of getting help around that they might not think they need or whatever it is. And so that can be a really big help. And then a lot of the kids who are like, well, I'm afraid I'm going to fail. And one of my favorite things to do, as long as I have a good relationship with the kid, is to say, well, if you ask me, you're failing now, but you're still here and you're okay
Mm,
and you're alive and you're still loved. It's like if you really look at it, this idea that, oh, if I try and fail, you're failing because you're not engaging with it now and it matters to you. So
mm,
let's move that aside. Let's get rid of that
mm.
idea. And that sometimes is a wake up call for a lot of kids. Like, oh yeah, and then it's kind of like, well, I guess what do I have to lose? It can't get worse than this. You
Right.
know,
Right. You get into that space where you can start to see things on the other side, right? I failed, so it doesn't seem so scary,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
and but it is also recognizing that what they're trying to solve in that moment of I just got to get it done, whatever the it
Mhm.
is not something your brain can really effectively walk through, prioritize, and sequence through. It's too amorphous. It's too just a bowl of soup.
Right.
It's got to be more structured, more clarity into the micro skill of what needs to be there for a lot of these really brilliant kids to be like, oh, yeah, no, I do struggle with that. And I see it over
Mhm.
here and I see it over
Mhm.
here. And that pattern recognition works in their advantage And usually you get a lot more buy-in when they see it as a real tangible thing to work on.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor.
Continuing education is both a requirement and a learning opportunity, but finding the right CE provider can be challenging. AATBS, a triad company, offers continuing education for psychologists, social workers, marriage and family therapists, counselors, and behavior analysts. CE courses are available both individually and as part of our new All Access Pass. All Access Pass provides a library of over 250 unique courses. That's more than 800 hours of CEs, with new courses being added every month. As a special offer, Behavioral Health Today listeners can save 15% on CE purchases. Visit us at aatbs.com/BHT and enter promo code BHT15 during checkout. That's aatbs.com/BHT. Check out our library and check off your CE requirements today.
Sure. So as you're sort of, working with these kids, you can coach them to an extent, but what sorts of practices are you encouraging them to have this sort of reflection? Does that include like journaling? Does it include a model for questioning so that maybe they can empower themselves to correct that environment for them to get out of that paralysis?
Yeah, a lot of what we do is probably more Rogerian person-centered therapy than you might expect,
Okay.
where it's all reflection.
Mm.
It's not all reflection, but a lot of it is reflection where they're saying, "Oh, I'm I hate school." Okay, so you hate school. You know, do you have a sense of why you hate school? Because I just hadn't heard the why yet, and just
Mm.
reflecting back what they're giving me and then what I'm not hearing, so that there's a deeper sense of understanding. And then we use person of the therapist model of metabolizing what we're picking up on in the moment, what the therapist is feeling, experiencing, sensations, and using that as a guide to say, is that what I'm picking up from this person? So I'm going to use that to reflect to them that the more I hear you talk, the more I'm getting a sense of stress. And you could be right or wrong, but the idea is you're staying it's not like interrogation. It's not a lot of questions that we do in our work. Because the
Right.
more you get into questions with gifted kids, man, they take you for a ride. They're going to go all over the place, every which way. They're going to talk about everything they want to talk about. So it's got to be very
Mhm.
direct and relationship focused with these
Mhm.
kids, and you can never baby them. Almost
Mhm.
never. You're never talking down to them or be like, well, I just think maybe it's like that voice will just send them running. It's like they want to know the real deal and they
Mhm.
want you to be straightforward, even at a younger age, and not aggressive, but just but real, right? So it's really again about the relationship. And a lot of the training we do and our practice with everybody that works for me is about how you create a relationship first and foremost before any of this comes out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I imagine that it really just is a foundation of trust and knowing that that is really the work in this.
Well, yeah, and we have such a knowledge of what symptoms look like and how they
Mm.
present. And
Mhm.
like, you could put a kid in the couch with me and he's in with a parent and I ask him a question and the first thing he does is he looks at his parent or he looks at his mom or his dad. And if that's happening over and over, that already tells me something because I have an understanding of how auditory processing issues work and language processing issues work. And I'm seeing that kid rely on the parent to interpret because answering that open-ended question that I might have started with is just too much, right? It's a little deer in headlights. And so yeah, we're trained to look at some of these things and what they could really mean, but each kid is different. There's no gifted kid that's really alike another.
Right, right. So then I want to kind of ask, what is a traditional therapeutic or educational model that you believe is ineffective for gifted kids? And what would you encourage doing instead?
So I'm a big believer in structural family therapy, honestly. I'm a big believer in the systems work. It's
Yeah.
really all about systems. So,
Mhm.
Andy Mahoney, the guy I mentioned, he created a model for how to work with these kids. And what it really is it's an identity formation tool where we're trying to figure out what it is they're trying to build. And a lot of times it's just a gifted student identity, which is, what it means to be asynchronous as heck and in an education system that's very normative. And how do you build an identity through that? And what we look at in each and every case is every single system, the self system, the family of origin, their physiology, their psychology, their religious upbringing, their socioeconomic status, their culture, their gender, their, on and on and on.
Yeah. Wow.
All of it interplays with anything you're trying to build. And then we're looking to see if those systems validate or invalidate that identity. Do they affirm, meaning build up, support, and challenge, or not affirm? Do you affiliate with people within these systems around this identity? And does it meet your purpose in life or your affinity? And this grid format of handling the level of complexity that's involved is really how you work with these kids. And if you get too focused on one thing without connecting the pieces of how it relates over here and over there and how it relates to mom and dad's experience and their life growing up, it becomes very difficult to get that true depth of understanding that gifted kids crave in order to really be like, oh, like that's a big deal. Like that's something I'm struggling with. Holy smokes.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. What you're describing right now is the art of relational work that you're doing. And
Yes.
I think that so much of these systems are not aware to us. And, this is sort of the beauty of working with specialists, right? And they can sort of see things from different angles. Takes a village sometimes. But I think it's
Yes.
a unique skill set that you are offering for these gifted kids that they might not have in their own family systems. So I want to sort of park on that, right? How do you get the families involved into this? I know you talked a little bit about how there has to be a little bit of buy-in from the family, but talk to me a little bit about that work.
Well, it can be very tricky because it's such an integral part of our process. We're pretty non-apologetic about it's got to be there. And so
Yeah,
very upfront, we're like, look, as we're working this case with you, as we're being connected with you as a family, we're going to evaluate if there's more information needed within the family, within the relational structures, within, the school. And then we make recommendations about how we can explore that or deal with that or help support them in what they're trying to build. And so it's kind of like we set them up like, are you open to that? And if we ever get a family that's like, nope, I will not do family therapy. I will not go forward with this. I'll be like, then we are very limited in what we can do for this kid because we won't compromise our process because we know that's what works. And when I was really early in my career and I was a bit of, much more of a people pleaser, it was kind of like I would let the parents tell me what they were looking for and I would try to meet those expectations. And I can't tell you how much anxiety I was under, feeling like I was always failing because I wasn't rooted in a foundation of I know what I need to be doing for this kid. That's why I'm a big believer in supervision, working as a team, taking a village, like you said, because we all have blind spots. And if you try to do this work alone, good luck. It's hard.
Yeah. Yeah, the community piece, and again, it's one of those sort of great mirrors that we have in order to help us sort of navigate the parts that are blind to us, right? Having that buy-in is critical for all of this. I want to kind of talk about the family that might be struggling with executive function, right? And the chaos that might be at home. What is the effective place to start that intervention?
That one is tough because really rooted at the core of it is an enormous amount of pain and shame. And it doesn't need to be there ultimately, but it is there. And so when you're dealing with a kid who is all over the place, disorganized as heck, can't remember anything, and you find out that the parents really relate, and I'm curious about what things are like at home, and it turns out they have 5 dogs that are untrained and their stuff everywhere, and they're always flying by the seat of their pants. It can be a very stressful situation. Again, it's not creating really a good fit for what these people really need, typically. And approaching that with them, it triggers a lot of defenses because of how much it feels like they know what they're supposed to do. This is like every gifted kid. They know what they're supposed to do. What they're struggling with is the emotional impact of not being able to do it and a lack of understanding of why it's there and what could be helpful. And so it's really tricky because you want to go behavioral very quickly with these people. Like, why don't you do a chore wheel? Why don't you do a chart like this? Why don't you separate out your time? But again, if the skill isn't there, then we have to take a step back. Be like, okay, you're not at a place to do that yet, which means you need more help. which means you have to prioritize what it means to get help in that way from friends, neighbors, or yes, spending money on it. And there's a lot of reasons why none of that will work, but I don't deviate from the idea of like, but it has to be something,
Mm.
because you can't continue to go through this alone. And you can't continue to go through this in the way you are because you're suffering.
Mm.
And that is where really knowing those people and knowing that that's where the pain lives is how you can extract a sense of buy-in so that you can provide some level of hope, which is just a pathway towards making the change they're looking for. And to help them know they're not alone. I mean, that is a lot of people that we work with.
Yeah.
And there's nothing morally failing about it in the slightest. That's one of the biggest challenges for these gifted kids. Well, I just don't work hard enough. I'm lazy. I'm a moral failure. No, you are not. Not according to this neuropsych report that I have that gives me hard data to show that you're not.
Right.
You know,
Right.
that understanding and almost relief of it's not just that I suck can
Yeah.
be something that allows them to hear that there are other ways and tools to deal with whatever it is they're dealing with.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting, as you sort of evaluate that kind of environment, right? That sort of family system, because I think what is most helpful in those is that you're almost sort of the corrective emotional response, right? Because
Right.
they've heard certain things, told the story in their mind so many times. It's really somebody on the other side that says it's not quite true. And I'm kind of curious for the families that maybe don't necessarily have the skills, what
Mhm.
resources do you typically offer them?
Depends on the challenge, but it's I guess like if you were to give me an example, maybe I could help give more specificity.
Sure. How about a family with a parent member with ADHD, but too much stigma in order to get themselves diagnosed, but
Right.
not necessarily organized to get their child diagnosed?
Right. Okay. So you got a parent who is, not dealing with their own challenges and learning difficulties and interaction with the world,
Right.
and they're unwilling to get help around it.
Right. There's desire, but there's not enough organization.
Right. Okay. There's desire, but not enough organization. Okay. Well, this is where we might go a little out of the box, where it's like if there's desire, then I look at it from an asynchronous development perspective. You want something, you have a passion and intention for it, but literally your skill level is more like a 9-year-old. And that's not a slam on them, it's not a critique. I'm dealing with what is. And so I would probably go the extra step of I have a person, I'm going to call them, I'm going to conference you in. And that's not as a rescuing mechanic. That's where you got to be really clear. I'm not doing it to do the work for them, I'm doing it to validate the level of severity that they are up against and how that presents itself as not being able to move ahead. And it's not that I'm going to do this for them forever. It's more like I know that right now what you need is bigger than what most people are telling you. Everybody's telling you just make the call. Why aren't you making the call? What
Yes.
are you doing?
Mhm.
What's wrong with you?
Mhm.
Why aren't you,
Mhm.
are you afraid? Blah, blah, blah. And they go psychology route. So it would probably be a lot more hands-on in that moment, considering I have a relationship with them and they don't think I'm full of BS or whatever.
Right, right, right.
But sometimes it's that route. Got to get
Yeah.
outside the box.
Hmm.
You can. It's like whenever I work with ADHD clients, or that's part of their profile rather. I'm so less interested in talk therapy and so much more interested in what can we do right now. Like they'll tell me like,
Yes.
oh, I've been putting off this professor. I go, oh, perfect.
Mm.
Because guess what we're doing together right now in the moment? Because this is what I want you to become aware of. Is that's how you've got to start to recognize when this is what you would need to do it in the moment. And let's give you a framework that makes sense to you so that you can replicate that on your own, or we'll do it again until it feels like it's in there for you.
Yeah.
And sometimes that repetitiveness is more than people think for very smart people. It's like, it's not, oh, I told them once and they know it. It's like I had to teach them 15 different times the same thing, and then it clicked.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting. And as you just go through that example, I recognize what a sharp skill you have in just listening, but also the fact that knowing that this is a moment to take action rather than maybe like the psychology route where we're talking about behaviors or what we could do. I think that that skill set of of knowing that action-oriented moment is the difference to behavioral correction later on.
Well, and exactly that. And again, because a lot of these kids kind of run away from the feelings around it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I'm with them in that moment of going behaviorally, I'm constantly evaluating, okay, and what does it feel like to have done that? And okay, what does it feel like that
Yeah.
we brought this up
Mm.
at all? And what was
Mm.
that like for you? And what did you notice about yourself? Because I want them to process it so much more effectively
Mm.
than they would if maybe just, like a academic coach was just having them do it. I want that deeper level of it
Sure.
sticks with them.
Sure. Yeah, I love that. Even myself, right? And there's a task that I don't want to do. I go the route of curiosity to say, start it and see how that feels.
Yeah,
Now it's like
exactly.
it's like exercise, right? Every time I maybe dread having to go and go outside for the walk, but when I'm in it, I feel it. And being able to reference that is so much more impactful than maybe trying to outline the benefits of doing it.
Yeah,
Like
right.
you
No, I
feel
mean,
it,
that
you
is
feel it
so
in your
much more
body.
real.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah. Well, I want to park a little bit on your podcast, right? Your podcast, Hopelessly Gifted, and where you explore real life pain of being labeled as gifted. So I want to ask you, why is it so important for individuals maybe to accept their quirks rather than try to fit into a normative mold?
It's funny. I know you just well enough to know that, like, the answer to that, but I love the question. So it's like, I named the podcast Hopelessly Gifted for two reasons.
Yeah.
One is I want to convey the message that you are who you are. That's it. It is. You might want to, you wish you were different. You have a idealistic version of yourself, but you are who you are. And that's great. And that's wonderful. And I wouldn't change it for the world. And so, yeah, it's a little bit of like, yeah, you're hopelessly gifted. It's just who you are. And at the same time,
Love it.
giftedness is such a, again, stigmatized word around achievement and Harvard and MIT and engineer, whatever it is, to where there's this sense that it is, all roses and success. And the truth is, for a lot of these kids and families, it's incredibly painful. And more than a
Mm.
few times, I've heard them say it feels hopeless. And I don't want to ignore that. But the idea is the way to find the hope is by acknowledging that there are moments of hopelessness and the pain underneath it, but that with understanding and education and a human approach to really understanding all of these little quirky behaviors, there's a way to be more in charge of how you want to be in this world and how you can connect and how you can stay without compromising yourself, without
Mm.
saying I shouldn't be a certain way. No, no, no. You are who you are. And so this
Mm.
podcast goes into a lot of, we work with experts that give us some more educational understanding of certain things like auditory processing, or we'll talk with gifted educators, or I share sometimes personal stories and just my own understanding of what it's like to be a gifted person, all in the hopes that people understand this is more relatable than you think.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine that your listeners find it so validating because having to kind of go through that experience and not necessarily having a maybe like a normative personality, it's very lonesome,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
You can't it's a harder time to sort of connect your story with others. And so to be able to have a space where you can share it, to have a place where people can learn and grow in that exact sort of niche, I think it is transformative for your
I, I
audience.
I really appreciate you saying that. I will tell you one of the funny things that happened is I never intended for kids to listen to it. I just didn't have that in my head. But I had a,
Yeah.
a family that come in. They're like, "Oh, we listened to it with our kid," and we asked him what he thought, and he goes, "That guy gets it." And it was the nicest thing anybody has ever said.
Yeah.
To where I was basically in tears. I'm like, "Thank you." Like it's like I feel seen. I feel like you get what I'm after. But having a child say that, like, when what I thought was kind of a more clinical, kind of heavy podcast was very nice
Yeah.
to hear.
Yeah. Good parenting. And,
Yeah,
you
right.
put the right information and just sort of ask questions. I think that creates good discussions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about the adults, right? Because we've talked about kids and really trying to give them some structure to make changes in their life. But for gifted adults, right? Those who feel unappreciated or out of balance in their careers, how would you advocate for a workspace that honors their unique vulnerabilities?
Right. And because again, we're creating a fit. right? As
Hmm.
something that we need for ourselves. But the process is still the same. Gifted kids grow up to be gifted adults. It doesn't go away, or it's not like, oh, I used to be gifted. Like that neurodivergence, that way your brain is wired, is still exists to some degree. And and so it's the same idea of, do you know yourself? Do you know what you're trying to do? Are you putting yourself in positions or workplaces where you are really not able to do the kind of work that you love doing, but you're doing it because you just think you're good at it, even though it's not fulfilling? Or you think you do it because, the idea of trying to find a job that's a better fit is way too overwhelming and too much and too taxing, so I just stay where I am. And so, for adults, you still are looking at the same things. There are skills that you could break down that were never fully developed, or you never learned how to talk about what you need without it sounding like whining, right? Or like, oh, how do I ask for, a quiet space without it being like, my boss rolling their eyes? And how do you handle that if the boss does roll their eyes? How do you hold a person accountable to that? How do you stay centered? All of that takes skill. All of that is something to learn how to do. And we expect too much of our very brilliant people in this world, that they should know how to do everything because they're so good at a few things or a lot of things. And
Yeah.
that's the real challenge. And this is where ego can get a little bit more tricky. Like the idea of like, well, you kind of need to work on that skill. And they're like, no, I don't. I'm really good at it here. And it's like, okay, yes, in that context over there. We're dealing with what you're up against here in your work. But, I absolutely believe in advocating for what is going to support you and activate you and allow you to do what you love to do, at least, or do a more efficient job of what you want to do, whatever your goals are. But it's almost the same process, really.
Yeah, it does sound very similar in the process, but it really, as you're talking, I think this the opportunity, not the opportunity, what's the word here? I think as you sort of outline this, I think the thing that really sticks to me is that as adults, or this concept of being an adult, we're expected to know and do everything by ourselves. There's like a high sense of independence.
Yes.
And what you're talking about is we can still ask for help. We can ask others for accountability to
Yep.
to keep us, on track with what those things are, right? Think about the job task of having to go into a different career. Having somebody else to keep you accountable could be the difference of you getting over that task. Um,
Absolutely.
and so just that little bit of reminder that understanding where your weaknesses and having somebody for support can be done even as a grown adult.
And there's this idea that nobody's going to understand what my challenge is.
Mm,
And I want that to not be so externalized. They won't understand it. I always bring it back to you. Do you understand it? Do you really know how to speak to it? I know you get it inside.
mm,
Like it all makes sense up in the head or in the heart. But if you don't have even a script or a way that you know how it will be heard, and how maybe you don't need to share or overshare everything that happened to you when you were a little kid for why, you need a private bathroom at work. You know what I mean? It's like it's can be something where you learn how to get what you need without feeling like, well, it's got to be this way. If I don't do this, then this will happen. And there's a rigidity that others are there to help you work through or find a way around, so that you can be open to new ideas and new ways of being. But you have to let that part of you that is a little, I got to do it all myself, down.
yes.
You have to say,
Yes.
no, I gotta, I gotta say, maybe I don't know everything. Maybe somebody else has something, and I'm not going to expect them to fix my problem, but I'm going in with the intention of working with another person to broaden my awareness that maybe I'm missing something.
Mm. There's a lot of courage in that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of courage. Well, I do want to kind of give our listeners a takeaway here, right? And one of the goals that you're teaching parents is to be an expert on their own kid, right? You've said it not in those exact words, but in my research, you do say the expert of your own kids. And what is the most important skill a parent needs to develop in order to support a child whose development is out of balance?
Right. So the most important thing, I want to bring it down to almost just acknowledging that you have the capacity to be that expert of what's going on, and I want to validate. We always have this phrase in our office, and it's this is a very gendered phrase, but always trust a mother's gut,
Mm.
meaning that parent, and yes, typically the mother, but that parent, if they feel like something's off or wrong, or that the fit isn't right, or this kid is struggling, I always say, then that's where it is. It's in there. But my job is to help them understand how to evaluate and assess in a much broader manner, so they're not like laser focusing in on one thing or targeting this one teacher as a way to make things better for the kid, but how to broaden out, how it might need to be a more systemic approach. And so, what I want parents to understand is that to really support gifted kids, it's complex, but don't run from that. Run into it. Go into it with the idea that it's going to be overwhelming at times, and it's going to feel like I'm have no way to move forward here. It's not supposed to be easy. And then anybody that tells you that it is, or that there's just, why don't you just, yell at your kid more or some ridiculous advice, you can just keep walking past that. And yeah, to seek out people that maybe do this kind of work. You go to our website. We have videos on there, talk a lot about language processing, which is something that gets skipped a lot, but very impactful to families and kids and adults as well. But have a team, don't do it alone. I guess that's the main piece.
Yeah. Recognize where you need the help.
Yeah.
Recognize where Oh, Mark, I have so enjoyed our conversation today. The relational work that you're doing, and really just the art of knowing the systems. I think it makes a big difference in the kids that you work with. But I think that work really ripples out into the family systems and then greater into those communities. So again, I want to thank you for coming onto my podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
And just once more, I do want to give you an opportunity for folks to learn more about it. So share with our listeners where they can go to explore your developmental framework or listen to your Hopelessly Gifted podcast. Where's the best way for them to connect with you and the Center for Identity Potential?
You can go right to the Center for Identity Potential.com. You'll find a lot of resources on there. We make book recommendations, things like that, but I'm a lot more about our services. And if it feels like it could be a fit for you or your family, we're happy to, get on the phone with you to see if, it's a good fit. We're a very big believer that you got to like working with us. We got to like working with you, because that's the only way any of this works. So we work very hard to make sure that is what we can do for you. At the same time, if you're interested in the podcast, it's a free resource. It's called Hopelessly Gifted, and you could find it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And I put episodes about every other week on Mondays.
Awesome. Well, I'm hoping our listeners will take a chance to look you up and listen to your podcast. But, your website alone was an awesome resource, and I really enjoyed looking through it myself.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Mark, for today, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
I want to thank you, our listeners, for taking the time to join us. You can follow us on our social media at Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube, and more at Behavioral Health Today. If you like our show, please give us 5 stars and leave us a review. And as always, the resources for this episode and an archive of all our other episodes can be found at our webpage at triadhq.com/BHT. And we look forward to having you back with us next time on Behavioral Health Today. We appreciate all the support from our community, and if you like our show, one of the best ways you can support it is by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review. Behavioral Health Today is a podcast part of the Triad Behavioral Health Network, all rights reserved.